Order, please. À l'ordre. S'il vous plaît. There is no need to rise. Vous n'avez pas besoin de vous lever. This sitting of the Foreign Interference Commission is now in session. Commissioner Hogue is presiding. Cette séance de la Commission sur l'ingérence.
This session on the inquiry into foreign interference is now in session.
En cours.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. Today marks the opening of the first series of public hearings of the Commission of Inquiry into Foreign Interference in federal electoral processes and democratic institutions. These hearings, I would like to acknowledge, are being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the representatives of Public Services and Procurement Canada for their cooperation and availability in organizing the venues in such a way that everyone can work effectively and the public feels welcome. My name is Marie-Josée Hogue, and I have been appointed commissioner to preside over the Commission's work and bring it to a successful conclusion. I usually serve as judge on the Quebec Court of Appeal, and although I will be returning to my duties when the Commission's work is completed, I have been devoting myself entirely to the Commission's work since mid-September. I would like to thank the Chief Justice of Quebec, the Honorable Manon Savard, for agreeing to temporarily relieve me of my duties as a judge. Welcome to you all, wherever you are.
Welcome to you all, whenever you are. Présent dans cette salle, écoutant la télévision ou par web diffusion.
Here in this room, listening on television or via webcast, thank you for your interest in the Commission's work. It demonstrates the importance you attach to our democracy and your commitment to ensuring its protection. I am accompanied today by some of the Commission staff. Ms. Chantona Choudhury is the Commissioner's lead counsel. You will get to know her and appreciate her work. I'm certain about that. Many of the counsel on her team are also here today, and you will have the opportunity to see them in action this week. I'm also accompanied by Professor Geneviève Cartier, our Research Council Chair. Her team has identified experts with the knowledge required to assist the Commission in carrying out its mandate. I will come back to the role of these experts later. I would like to thank them all for their commitment, as well as those who work behind the scenes, executive directors, communications managers, editors, assistants, translators, interpreters, administrative and technical staff, and security personnel. Without them, it would simply be impossible to carry out the mandate entrusted to us.
Before turning to the Commission's intended work, I would like to recall the context that gave rise to its creation, what the role of a Commission of Inquiry is, and the mandate that has been entrusted to us here. I will then give an overview of the work the Commission wants to undertake and how we intend to do it. Allegations that foreign governments are attempting to interfere in Canadian elections have been circulating for some time. But these allegations were particularly prevalent in 2022, when some media outlets reported that they had received information suggesting foreign interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. In the wake of these revelations, some members of Parliament have publicly asserted that they themselves have been the target of foreign interference and that they were not notified about it in good time by Canadian authorities. Given the importance of protecting our democracy, these allegations have sparked significant debate and discussion, both at the political level and in the media. Thus, in March 2023, The Government of Canada appointed the Right Honourable David Johnston as independent special rapporteur, asking him to determine whether foreign governments had indeed attempted to influence election results, either by interfering with voters or with the candidate themselves. He was also asked to review, where appropriate, the information and actions taken by the federal government in relation to the threat of foreign interference, and to determine whether it will be advisable to investigate the matter further. Le rapporteur spécial Johnston.
Special Rapporteur Johnston submitted a public report together with a confidential annex on the 23rd of May 2023. In his report, he concluded that foreign governments had attempted to influence candidates and voters in the last two elections, but without compromising the integrity of the elections. He also expressed the opinion that the way the information on this matter had been circulated was problematic, adding, however, that nothing he had seen led to the conclusion that the Prime Minister or any minister or their respective offices had refrained voluntarily or through negligence from acting on information they may have received relating to acts of foreign interference. He recommended that an additional public process, other than a public commission of inquiry given the amount of related classified documents, be undertaken to further examine the threat posed by foreign interference. There is no need to revisit the events that subsequently led to the Special Rapporteur's resignation. Suffice it to say that on the 7th of September 2023, with the agreement of all the recognized political parties, the Government of Canada established by order in council the present Commission of Inquiry and appointed me Commissioner. I took office shortly after on the 18th of September. I would like to say a few words on the nature and role of a Commission of Inquiry. A Commission of Inquiry is a public institution created by the government and entirely independent of it in the pursuit of its work. It has considerable leeway in all its decisions relating to the way it chooses to proceed. It is not bound by conclusions arrived at by others called upon to study similar matters. That being said, the Commission has to carry out its powers as stated in the constitutive mandate while respecting procedural fairness. The role of a Commission of Inquiry is to investigate the facts in order to understand what happened in a given situation. Under its mandate, it carries out an objective search of the truth while identifying specific matters, draws conclusions, and makes recommendations to the government. Subject to some constraints I'll come back to later, those facts are made public.
Investigate the facts in order to understand what happened in a given situation. Its objective is to search for the truth, seeking to understand what happened in order to inform the public and make recommendations to the government. It attempts to identify all relevant facts and then draw conclusions. Subject to certain constraints, to which I will return later, it makes these facts public. Le processus qu'une commission d'enquête applique n'est donc pas.
The process followed by a commission of inquiry is therefore not an adversarial one, like that of a civil or commercial proceeding, nor an accusatory one like that of a criminal trial. It is not the role of a commission of inquiry to seek to identify guilty parties or those responsible. There is no plaintiff or defendant, no accused. That being said, the Commission makes public its observations, even if this may undermine the reputation of some persons and organizations. The Commissioner's lawyer and I are neutral and impartial. We represent the public interest, and our goal is to uncover the truth, whatever it may be.
Neutral and impartial. We represent the public interest, and our goal is to uncover the truth, whatever it may be. You will note throughout its work that the Commission Council will work together with the lawyers of the participants, be they parties or interveners. This is standard practice in the Commission of Inquiry. Everyone must work towards the same goal: understanding what happened, learning from it, and making recommendations for the future. This idea of cooperation is so important that the rules of practice and procedure adopted by the Commission expressly impose an obligation on Council to cooperate with one another. It even goes so far as to provide for the possibility of participants or their lawyers to suggest to Commission Council topics to explore with witnesses or questions to ask them. This cooperation is essential if the Commission is to be effective and make good use of the very limited time at its disposal. That being said, I may choose to allow some interveners or their lawyer, as the case may be, to ask certain witnesses questions on specific subject if I feel, along the way, that it may be useful in better understanding certain facts. This is a discretionary power that I will retain throughout the hearings and exercise as necessary. The applicable rules of evidence are also flexible, as a Commission is not bound to adhere to strict rules of evidence in the same way that courts generally are. This flexibility is just as essential to enable the Commission to effectively carry out its work within the limited time allocated. Thus, I can allow evidence to be presented in multiple ways, provided, of course, that in doing so, I uphold procedural fairness. As Commissioner, I indeed have the obligation to ensure that the rights of all are respected. Since I am presiding over the hearings, and it will be up to me to draw conclusions from the evidence being presented, I want to stress that I have not yet seen that evidence. I have discussed with the Commission Council the subject that seem relevant to me and the way in which the hearing should be conducted, but I have chosen to participate neither in the meetings with potential witnesses nor in the review of the documents obtained. I have chosen this approach to ensure that I have no preconceived ideas, and I will adhere to it throughout the Commission work. Puisque je préside les audiences et qu'il
Since I am presiding over the hearings and it will be up to me to draw conclusions from the evidence being presented, I want to stress that I have not yet seen that evidence. I have discussed with the Commission's lawyers the subjects that seem relevant to me and the way in which the hearings should be conducted, but I have chosen to participate neither in the meetings with potential witnesses nor in the review of the documents obtained. I have chosen this approach to ensure that I have no preconceived ideas and I will adhere to it throughout the Commission's work. That being said, my team and I will make every effort to get to the bottom of things and understand what the country has faced and what it may still be facing in terms of foreign interference. Foreign interference in our democratic institutions is a very serious issue. It requires us to investigate, analyze, and reflect as thoroughly as possible in order to ultimately identify the best ways to counter it, or if it is not possible to prevent it entirely, to limit its effects.
That said, my team and I will make every effort to get to the bottom of things and understand what the country has faced and what it may still be facing in terms of foreign interference. Foreign interference in our democratic institutions is a very serious issue. It requires us to investigate, analyze, and reflect as thoroughly as possible in order to ultimately identify the best ways to counter it, or, if it's not possible to prevent it entirely, to limit its effects. Conformément aux termes du décret,
In conformity with the terms of the order in council, the Commission, in the first stage of the factual phase of its work, must examine whether China, Russia, or other actors, state or non-state, you probably know that the Commission is also interested in India, interfered in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. And if so, we must also assess the repercussions that these acts or attempts to interfere may have had on the integrity of the elections, both nationally and at the constituency level. The Commission must then examine, where appropriate, the way in which information obtained in this regard circulated and the measures that could have been taken in response.
In conformity with the terms of the order in council, the Commission, in the first stage of the factual phase of its work, must examine whether China, Russia, or other actors, state or non-state, you probably know that the Commission is also interested by India, interfered in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. And if so, we must also assess the repercussions that these acts or attempts to interfere may have had on the integrity of the elections, both nationally and at the constituency level. The Commission must then examine, where appropriate, the way in which information obtained in this regard circulated and the measures that could have been taken in response. La Commission rédigera et déposera en première affaire.
The Commission will draw up and submit a first report on these issues by the 3rd of May at the latest. In the second stage of the factual phase, the Commission must analyze the country's capacity and means to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference, paying attention to three main considerations. First, how information is created, exchanged, assessed, and disseminated, and how advice for senior decision makers, including elected officials, is formulated. Secondly, the support and protection measures in place to protect members of a diaspora who may be particularly vulnerable and become the first victims of such interference. Finally, the mechanisms that were in place to protect the 2019 and 2021 elections from foreign interference compared to those that were in place in more recent elections before 2019.
The Commission must analyze the country's capacity and means to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference, paying attention to three main considerations. First, how information is created, exchanged, assessed, and disseminated, and how advice for senior decision makers, including elected officials, is formulated. Secondly, the support and protection measures in place to protect members of a diaspora who may be particularly vulnerable and become the first victims of such interference. Finally, the mechanisms that were in place to protect the 2019 and 2021 elections from foreign interference compared to those that were in place in more recent elections. Finally, in the policy phase of its work, the Commission will think of ways to ameliorate states' capacity to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference, as well as, if applicable, ways in which relevant information is communicated to interested persons and then formulate recommendations.
Finally, in the policy phase of its work, the Commission will think of ways to improve the state's capacity to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference, as well as, if applicable, ways in which relevant information is communicated to interested persons and then formulate recommendations. The Commission will draw up a second report on this subject, which, in addition to its factual conclusions, would include all of these recommendations regarding the issues raised in its mandate. This report must be submitted no later than the 31st of December 2024. The Commission is thus facing two major challenges: the time available to it and the fact that the vast majority of documents and information to which we will have access in the course of our work and on which we will base our conclusions are likely to be so-called classified documents. The limited time that it has and provided for in its mandate is there, but there's also the need to quickly study the matter of foreign interference and think of ways of quickly formulating recommendations to increase the government's capacity to detect it and to counter it. If that time constraint can be lifted through the collaboration work we've mentioned, that related to the processing of classified documents, this would require specific work. And this is what we'll be delving into in the next week. When we talk about intelligence and classified information, we are talking about documents and information that cannot be made public. But a public inquiry, as the name indicates, is intended to clarify the public. The mandate that was given to it requires a fundamental duality: respect the laws and regulations that are applied to classified information and maximize the transparency of its deliberations. Luckily, the inquiry will be resorting to lots of experienced counsel who are experienced in evidence when it comes to classified documents and intelligence, and some of them have been recognized by the Federal Court for acting as amicus curiae, friends of the court, when this court had to resolve disputes in this matter, specifically to determine the challenges, limitations, and the possible dangers related to public disclosure of classified information and intelligence related to national security. The order in council requires that there be some in-camera deliberations. These are preliminary deliberations related to national security confidentiality, and this is what we'll be doing this week. Why describe it as preliminary hearings? Because this would help prepare subsequent public hearings which will deal with the substantive issues. Furthermore, presentations, discussions, and testimony that will take place this week will be only about the challenge that is national safety in the context of a commission of inquiry and not on substantive issues.
The work we will undertake this week consists of first understanding the constraints arising from the fact that many of the relevant pieces of information and documents are classified, and secondly, considering the best ways for the Commission to make public as much information as possible during the hearings of stages 1 and 2 and in its reports. During these preliminary hearings, we will hear from factual witnesses and recognized experts who, as we wrote in our second notice to the public, will help the Commission and the public understand both the risk that may arise from the disclosure of classified information and the practices that can be adopted to allow the disclosure of as much information as possible, while adhering to applicable legal and national security constraints. Here is what we are considering as a work schedule, subject, of course, to what we discover in the course of the inquiry. Let us first clarify that the two phases of the work, which I referred to earlier, cannot be completely separated from each other. The investigation that has begun and the evidence that will be introduced at each series of public hearings, whether they relate to stage 1 or stage 2, can and will certainly be useful in enabling us to understand the situation in its entirety. Based on what we hear during this week's hearings, the Commission will work to make disclosable the classified documents and information it has already received and will continue to receive as it carries on with the inquiry concurrently. and I should say as much as possible. À la lumière de ce qu'elle aura entendu lors des
Based on what we hear during this week's hearings, the Commission will work to make disclosable the classified documents and information it has already received and will continue to receive as it carries out with the inquiry concurrently.
We will again hold public hearings, probably at the end of March 2024, which will focus on the issue raised in the first phase of our work. La Commission devra-t-elle également tenir...
The Commission will also hold in-camera hearings as provided for in its mandate, considering the amount of classified information. It is very likely that will happen. That being said, the Commission will try to find ways to communicate the essence of the information obtained, for instance, by means of summary. It is also possible that certain persons called upon to testify before the Commission who fear for their safety or the safety of members of their family request that their identity be protected or certain information provided be kept confidential. Such requests may lead to the need for in-camera hearings.
Persons called upon to testify before the Commission who fear for their safety or the safety of members of their family request that their identity be protected and or certain information provided be kept confidential. Such requests may lead to a need to hold in-camera hearings. À cet égard, je rappelle que la Commission...
In this respect, I would like to point out that the Commission has adopted rules of practice and procedure which contain a number of measures designed to safeguard those who provide us with information. These rules, though technical in nature, are well worth consulting for those interested in the Commission's work. They are available on the Commission's website under Documents. As for measures that may be taken to safeguard certain individuals, please refer specifically to Rules 51 and 82 to 85. We must retain the fact that the Commission is very aware of the fact that we may need to protect the identity of some witnesses or some information that citizens or groups share with the Commission. Those who ask that the identity be protected would have made that request before their testimony or before providing information.
Remember is that the Commission is well aware that it may be necessary to protect the identity of certain witnesses or certain information that citizens or groups will communicate, and that I will not hesitate to do so when I deem it appropriate. In fact, those who request that their identity be protected will know of my decision in this regard before they undertake to testify or provide information and documents. J'ai par ailleurs l'intention d'assurer le respect.
It is also my intention to ensure that everyone's rights are respected during in-camera hearings. Therefore, I may choose to limit the scope of testimony or to disregard certain information that may be communicated to me during such hearings in private if I deem it necessary, in order not to jeopardize the reputation or rights of citizens who, it must be said, will not, in such circumstances, have the opportunity to submit said testimony or information to cross-examination. I would also like to remind you that testifying will not be the only means available for relaying information to the Commission. The Commission intends to set up a process that will enable all those who wish to do so to submit their comments and suggestions to the Commission and to share relevant experiences they may have in relation to issues within the Commission's mandate. This process will be user-friendly and will allow those communicating information in this way to request that their identity and certain shared information be protected.
An email address to facilitate sharing of confidential information. Strict measures have been put in place to protect the confidentiality of information sent via the email address, also available on the Commission website. At present, it is planned that the public hearings during which the Commission will examine the country's capacity and means to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference, stage 2, will take place in September 2024. The factual investigation of stage 2 will take place and will be followed by hearings on the policy phase of the Commission, which will bring to light the Research Council's work. Further details about the Council members may be found on the website. Concurrently and throughout its work, the Commission will collaborate closely with the Research Directorate, which has set up a Research Council made up of 4 academics whose combined skills cover all aspects of the Commission's mandate. The Council's role is to design and implement a research program that will support the Commission in all aspects of its mandate. Experts will then be invited to produce reports or take part in public roundtable discussions with the aim of providing the insights the Commission needs, in particular with a view to submitting to the government relevant and realistic recommendations on ways to detect and counter interference, or at the very least, to minimize its impacts. For the time being, however, we must get on with our preliminary hearings, and to do so, I give the floor to Mrs. Chaudury. Thank you.